Hey everyone, and welcome to another deep dive. This time, we're looking at something maybe a little different, kind of a fresh take on the Christmas story.
Yeah, we're going to be diving into the Syriac Christian perspective on the birth of Christ.
Exactly. And, this whole thing was actually inspired by a teacher named Andre Mobarak.
He's a Maronite Syriac Christian, and he teaches from this really unique Aramaic perspective.
Right. And for anyone listening who wants to go even deeper with that Aramaic Bible study, you can find him at www.twinstores.com.
Absolutely. But for today, we'll be focusing on one specific element of the Nativity story, the cave.
Okay, so right off the bat, we're kind of challenging that image everyone has, right? Like the classic nativity scene.
Yeah, in Eastern Christianity, and particularly the Syriac tradition, there's strong emphasis on Christ being born in a cave, not just a stable.
Huh. So it's not just like a nice, cozy stable.
Not quite. And this isn't some recent thing either. We see mentions of this cave tradition going way back, like to the earliest Christian writings. Think Justin Martyr, Origen, writing in the 2nd century, long before the Church of the Nativity was even built.
So this cave idea has been around for a while. But honestly, why a cave? Doesn't really sound like the most kingly birthplace,
Well, if you think about ancient Judea, caves were actually pretty practical.
Okay.
They provided shelter, they were relatively stable, and, a lot of families who didn't have any resources would use them.
So it kind of fits the whole, Jesus being born in humble circumstances thing.
Exactly. It grounds the story in the reality of the time and place.
I see. Yeah, I can almost picture it, those limestone hills around Bethlehem, dotted with caves.
Right. Definitely changes the mental image a bit.
It does. And you mentioned this resonated even more with Syriac Christians. Why is that?
Well, they were often living in or near caves themselves.
Sure.
So it was a familiar setting, something they could really connect with.
That's really interesting. It just shows how the same story can have all these different layers of meaning for different cultures, right?
Absolutely.
But you were saying there's even a deeper theological significance to the cave for Syriac Christians.
Oh, absolutely. One of the key things the cave emphasizes is Christ's self-emptying. Theologians call it kenosis.
Kenosis.
Yeah, you know that verse for Philippians 2:7? He emptied himself, taking the form of a servant.
Right.
Well, the cave becomes this powerful symbol of that humility. Instead of being born in a palace, surrounded by luxury, he chooses to enter the world in this simple, humble space.
Wow, that really flips the script on how we usually picture a king being born.
And the Syriac tradition takes it even further. They connect the nativity cave to Jesus's tomb.
Wait, really?
Yeah, both are caves, both kind of signifying beginnings in a way.
Huh. I never thought of it that way. One cave marks the start of his earthly life, and the other, his victory over death.
Exactly. It kind of brings that whole salvation narrative full circle. Incarnation, crucifixion, resurrection.
All tied together by this imagery of the cave. Okay, so we've got the humility, the connection to the tomb. What else did the Syriac tradition find in the cave?
Well, think about this. Caves are dark, right?
Yeah.
But Jesus is described as the light of the world coming into that darkness. And this becomes huge in Syriac hymns and prayers. They often connect it back to Isaiah 9:2. The people who walked in darkness have seen a great light.
So the darkness represents the world before Christ, and his birth is that radiant light, breaking through.
Precisely. And there are some beautiful lines in the hymns of St. Ephrem, a 4th century Syriac theologian and poet, where he talks about this very thing, how the cave, this place of darkness, becomes the birthplace of the light of the world.
That's some powerful imagery.
It really is. It's like the setting itself is part of the theological message.
And there's more, right? You said there was one more layer.
One more big one. Syriac Christians saw the cave as representing the earth itself.
As in?
As in the earth itself welcoming its creator.
Whoa. It's like creation itself is participating in the Incarnation.
Exactly. It's not just about a baby in a cave. It's about God becoming a part of creation, redeeming it from within.
This is already giving me so much to think about.
Yeah.
And I'm sure our listeners are right there with us.
Yeah, it's pretty mind-blowing stuff.
We've covered a lot of ground, though.
Yeah.
What else is there to unpack about this Syriac Christian view of the cave?
Well, we've focused a lot on the symbolism, but we should also think about how this understanding actually plays out in Syriac Christian practices and traditions. And of course, we can't forget the historical dimension with the Church of the Nativity.
Right, the actual cave in Bethlehem.
There's a lot more to dig into there.
Sounds like we need to take a breath and pick up this amazing discussion in our next part. Okay, so last time we were talking about how the cave where Christ was born, it's not just some symbol for Syriac Christians, right?
It really isn't. It's woven into their whole lived experience of faith.
So it's more than just like a cool idea, it's something they actually, like, live out.
Exactly. You see it in their liturgy, their hymns, the prayers they say.
Can you give us an example? Like, how would this play out in a Syriac church service?
Sure. Think of the hymns of St. Ephrem.
He was at,
Syriac writer from the 4th century, super prolific. His hymns about the Nativity are still sung today.
wow, 4th century and still going strong.
And they're full of this vivid imagery, describing the womb, the cave, these humble earthly places holding God.
That's beautiful. It really captures that contrast,
Right.
the infinite becoming finite.
Yeah, exactly. And it goes even further than that. The Syriac liturgical texts actually draw a parallel between the manger in the cave and the altar in the church.
Wait, hold on. A manger and an altar. How do those go together?
Think about what they both hold. The bread of life.
Okay.
The manger held baby Jesus. And for Christians, he is the bread of life, that source of spiritual nourishment.
Right.
And the altar, it holds the Eucharist, which represents Christ's body.
Oh, I get it now. So there's this symbolic connection between the beginning of Christ's life and the sacrament that sustains the church.
Right. You got it. It's not just a historical event, it's a living mystery. And the cave becomes this sacred space that points to that.
That is amazing. One image, so much meaning. But speaking of history, we got to talk about the actual cave in Bethlehem, the traditional site of the birth, right?
Of course. That cave, the Cave of the Nativity, became this huge pilgrimage destination for Christians.
Makes sense.
And in the 4th century, Emperor Constantine and his mother Helena, they had a church built over it.
The Church of the Nativity.
That's the one. It's still standing today, a real testament to the power of this story.
So the cave is both a symbol and an actual place.
Right. A tangible place that takes us back to that historical event, but also points to those deeper truths.
Exactly. And for Syriac Christians, it really sums up the heart of their faith.
It's like all these different things we've been talking about, the humility, the light and darkness, the tomb, the living tradition. It feels like they all point to something,
I think so too. For the Syriac tradition, the cave of Christ's birth becomes like this theological icon.
An icon. Yeah. It's this place where heaven and earth meet, where the divine steps into human history.
Where the infinite becomes finite.
And where God chooses to come to us in the humblest of settings. It reminds us how humble the Incarnation was, the light shining in the darkness, how Christ's birth and victory over death are connected. And ultimately, it points to the renewal of all creation.
That's a lot to take in. But it does make you think about the Christmas story in a whole new way. But I got to ask, what does this mean for us, the listeners? Like, how do we connect with this Syriac understanding of the cave?
That's the big question, isn't it? I think the key is realizing that the cave isn't just a setting or a theological idea. It's an invitation.
An invitation.
To do what? To think about how we can carry that light of Christ into our own lives, into a world that, let's face it, often feels pretty dark.
So it's not about just waiting for Christ to come back and fix everything.
Not at all. We're called to be a part of it, to bring that light into the world.
If the cave is the world and Christ is the light entering it, then we have to carry that light forward, right?
Exactly. This Syriac understanding of the cave, it challenges us to look at our own lives.
To ask ourselves,
How are we reflecting Christ's light? How are we bringing hope and healing to the darkness around us?
it's like the cave becomes this symbol not just of Christ's birth, but of our call to discipleship, to be those light bearers.
That's a great way to put it. And that's the hopeful part, Even in the darkest cave, the light can still shine through. Even when things are rough, there's always that possibility for redemption, for renewal.
Wow. This has been a really thought-provoking deep dive. I feel like I get the Christmas story so much better now. It's so much more than just that nice nativity scene.
It really is. And that's what's so cool about exploring these different Christian traditions. They enrich our faith, They challenge what we think we know, and they help us see those familiar stories in new ways.
For sure. And, I keep thinking back to Andre Mubarak, whose work kind of sparked this whole deep dive. That Aramaic perspective on the Bible just opens up so much.
Yeah, he's doing some really interesting work over there.
If anyone's interested in checking that out, remember his website is www.twinstours.com.
It's a good reminder that there's always more to learn, another layer to uncover. And sometimes those hidden layers are the ones with the most profound truths.
Okay, so we've covered a lot here. Anything else we should touch on before we wrap up this exploration of the Syriac cave?
There's one more thing about this whole cave thing that really sticks out to me. We've talked about it as this symbol of humility, this place where the light comes into darkness. But the Syriac tradition, it connects all that to like our role as Christians, in the world today.
Right, we've been looking at the theology, the symbolism, but how does it actually, like, play out for us?
Remember how we said the cave represents the earth itself, welcoming its creator? It's not just a pretty image. It's saying creation itself is somehow part of this whole redemption story.
Okay.
And if creation's involved, then surely we are too, right? We're part of creation.
So it's not just about, like, sitting around waiting for Christ to come back and fix everything?
No, not at all. We're meant to be active in this, bringing his light into the world.
So, like, if the cave is the world and Christ is the light coming in, then it's up to us to carry that light, right?
Exactly. That's the challenge the Syriac understanding puts to us.
It does make this whole conversation about the cave feel pretty relevant to, like, our everyday lives.
It's not just ancient history, it's a call to action. Think about it. How are we reflecting Christ's light in our own lives? How are we bringing hope, healing to all the darkness out there?
It's like the cave becomes this symbol, not just of Christ's birth, but of our own call to be disciples, to, like, actually be those light bearers.
Yeah, I love that. And that's the hope in all this. Even in the darkest cave, the light can shine through. Even when things are hard, there's always that chance for redemption, for new beginnings.
This has been amazing. I honestly feel like I have this whole new understanding of the Christmas story now. It's so much more than just a cute nativity scene.
Me too.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why it's so great to explore these different Christian traditions, They make our faith richer, they make us question what we think we know, and we get to see these stories we thought we knew in whole new ways.
And, I have to give another shout out to Andre Mubarak, whose work got us thinking about all this in the first place. That Aramaic perspective, it really opens up things.
It really does.
If you're listening and want to learn more, his website is www.twinstours.com.
It just goes to show there's always more to learn, right? Another layer to discover. And sometimes those are the layers with the deepest truths.
So as we finish up, I want to leave you all with this thought. What does the cave of Christ's birth mean to you? How does this Syriac understanding change how you see the Christmas story? And how can you, like, in your own way, be a bearer of that light in the world today?